must be made of the same wax. Then smite the limb of the image which answers to the particular limb of the man which you desire to disable. At the same moment the limb of flesh and blood will be paralyzed. 225. The following is another extract from the same treatise. To injure the eyes of an enemy, take a taper and fashion it into the likeness of him whom you would harm. Write on it the 7 signs, along with the name of your enemy and the name of his mother, and gouge out the 2 eyes of the figure with 2 points. Then put it in a pot with P66 quicklime on which you must throw a little cherub, al-hammam, and bury the whole near the fire. The fire will make your victim to shriek and will hurt his eyes so that he will see nothing, and that the pain will cause him to utter cries of distress. But do not prolong the operation more than 7 days, for he would die and you would have to answer for it at the day of the last judgment. If you wish to heal him, withdraw the figure and throw it into water. He will recover, with God's leave. 226. Cite a note. Magical images in ancient Egypt and Babylon. Nowhere, perhaps, were the magic arts more carefully cultivated. Nowhere did they enjoy greater esteem or exercise a deeper influence on the national life than in the land of the pharaohs. Little wonder, therefore, that the practice of enchantment by means of images was familiar to the wizards of Egypt. A drop of a man's blood, some clippings of his hair or parings of his nails, a rag of the garment which he had worn, sufficed to give a sorcerer complete power over him. These relics of his person the magician kneaded into a lump of wax, which he molded into the likeness and dressed after the fashion of his intended victim, who was then at the mercy of his tormentor. If the image was exposed to the fire, the person whom it represented straightway fell into a burning fever. If it were stabbed with a knife, he felt the pain of the wound. 227. Thus, for instance, a certain superintendent of the king's cattle was once prosecuted in an Egyptian court of law for having made figures of men and women in wax, thereby causing paralysis of their limbs and other grievous bodily harm. He had somehow obtained a book of magic which contained the spells and directions how to act in reciting them. Armed with this powerful instrument, the rogue had shut himself up in a secret chamber, and there proceeded to cast spells over the people of his town. 228. In ancient Babylonia also it was P67 a common practice to make an image of clay, pitch, honey, fat, or other soft material in the likeness of an enemy, and to injure or kill him by burning, burying, or otherwise ill-treating it. Thus in a hymn to the fire god Nusku we read, "Those who have made images of me, reproducing my features, who have taken away my breath, torn my hairs, who have rent my clothes, have hindered my feet from treading the dust, may the fire god, the strong one, break their charm." 229. Cite a note. Magical images in Babylon and Egypt for the discomfiture of demons. But both in Babylon and in Egypt this ancient tool of superstition, so painful in the hands of the mischievous and malignant, was also pressed into the service of religion and turned to glorious account for the confusion and overthrow of demons. In a Babylonian incantation, we meet with a long list of evil spirits whose effigies were burnt by the magician in the hope that, as their images melted in the fire, so the fiends themselves might melt away and disappear. 230. Every night, when the sun god Ra sank down to his home in the glowing west, he was assailed by hosts of demons under the leadership of the archfiend, Apipi. All night long he fought them, and sometimes by day the powers of darkness sent up clouds even into the blue Egyptian sky to obscure his light and weaken his power. To aid the sun god in this daily struggle, a ceremony was daily performed in his temple at Thebes. A figure of his foe Apipi, represented as a crocodile with a hideous face, or a serpent with many coils, was made of wax, and on it the demon's name was written in green ink. Wrapped in a papyrus case, on which another likeness of Apipi had been drawn in green ink, the figure was then tied up with black hair, spat upon, hacked with a stone knife, and cast on the ground. There the priest trod on it with his left foot, again and again, and then burned it in a fire made of a certain plant, or grass. When Apipi himself had thus been effectually disposed of, waxen effigies of each of his principal demons, and of their fathers, mothers, and children, were P68 made and burned in the same way. The service, accompanied by the recitation of certain prescribed spells, was repeated not merely morning, noon, and night, but whenever a storm was raging, or heavy rain had set in, or black clouds were stealing across the sky to hide the sun's bright disk. The fiends of darkness, clouds, and rain felt the injuries inflicted on their images as if they had been done to themselves. They passed away, at least for a time, and the beneficent sun god shone out triumphant once more. 231. Cita note, magical images in Scotland. From the azure sky, the stately fanes, and the solemn ritual of ancient Egypt, we have to travel far in space and time to the misty mountains and the humble cottages of the Scottish Highlands of today. But at our journey's end we shall find our ignorant countrymen seeking to attain the same end by the same means and, unhappily, with the same malignity as the Egyptian of old. To kill a person whom he hates, a modern Highlander will still make a rude clay image of him, called a corporation cure or corporation creed, clay body, stick it full of pins, nails, and broken bits of glass, and then place it in a running stream, with its head to the current. As every pin is thrust into the figure, an incantation is uttered, and the person represented feels the pain in the corresponding part of his body. If the intention is to make him die a lingering death, the operator is careful to stick no pins into the region of the heart, whereas he thrusts them into that region, deliberately if he desires to rid himself of his enemy at once. And as the clay puppet crumbles away in the running water, so the victim's body is believed to waste away and turn to clay. In a slay, the spell, spoken over the corporation cur, when it is ready to receive the pins, is as follows: from behind you are like a ram with an old fleece. And, as the pins are being thrust in, a long incantation is pronounced, beginning as you waste away, may she waste away. As this wounds you, may wound her. Sometimes, we are told, the effigy is set before a blazing fire on a door which has been taken off its hinges. There, it is toasted and P69 turned to make the human victim writhe in agony. The corporation cur is reported to have been employed of late years in the counties of Inverness, Ross, and Sutherland. A specimen from Inverness-shire may be seen in the Pitt Rivers Museum at Oxford. 232. It is remarkable, however, that in the Highlands this form of magic has no power over a man who has lost any of his members. For example, the Ross-shire witches made a clay figure of Donald of the Ear, they could not destroy him because he had lost an ear in battle. 233. A similar form of witchcraft, known as bearing the sheaf, seems still to linger in Ireland among the dwellers in the Bog of Ardee. The person who works the charm goes first to a chapel and says certain prayers with his back to the altar. Then he takes a sheaf of wheat, which he fastens into the likeness of a human body, sticking pins in the joints of the stems and, according to one account, shaping a heart of plaited straw. This sheaf he buries in the devil's name near the house of his enemy, who will, it is supposed, gradually pine away as the sheaf decays, dying when it finally decomposes. If the enchanter desires his foe to perish speedily, he buries the sheaf in wet ground, where it will soon molder away. But if on the other hand his wish is that his victim should linger in pain, he chooses a dry spot, where decomposition will be slow. 234. However, in Scotland, as in Babylon and Egypt, the destruction of an image has also been employed for the discomfiture of fiends. When Shetland fishermen wish to disenchant their boat, they P70 row it out to sea before sunrise, and as the day is dawning they burn a waxen figure in the boat, while the skipper exclaims, "Go hence, Satan!" 235. Cita note, magical images to procure offspring in America and Africa. If homeopathic or imitative magic, working by means of images, has commonly been practiced for the spiteful purpose of putting obnoxious people out of the world, it has also, though far more rarely, been employed with the benevolent intention of helping others into it. In other words, it has been used to facilitate childbirth and to procure offspring for barren women. Thus among the Eskimo of Bering Strait, a barren woman desirous of having a son will consult a shaman, who commonly makes, or causes her husband to make, a small doll-like image, over which he performs certain secret rites, and the woman is directed to sleep with it under her pillow. 236. Amongst the many ceremonies which a Thompson Indian girl of British Columbia had formerly to perform at puberty was the following. She had to run 4 times in the morning, carrying 2 small stones which had been obtained from underneath the water. These were put in her bosom, and as she ran, they slipped down between her body and her clothes and fell to the ground. While she ran, she prayed to the dawn that when she should be with child she might be delivered as easily as she had been delivered of these stones. 237. Similarly among the Haida Indians of the Queen Charlotte Island, the pregnant woman would let round stones, eels, chips, or other small objects slip down over her abdomen for the sake of facilitating her delivery. 238. Among the Nishnayim Indians of California, when a woman is childless, her female friends sometimes make out of grass a rude image of a baby and tie it in a small basket, after the Indian fashion. Someday, when the woman is from home, they lay this grass baby in her hut. On finding it, she holds it to her breast, pretends P71 to nurse it, and sings it lullabies. This is done as a charm to make her conceive. 239. The Huichol Indians of Mexico believe in a certain mother who is the goddess of conception and childbirth, and lives in a cave near Santa Catarina. A woman, desirous of offspring, deposits in this cave a doll made of cotton cloth to represent the baby on which her heart is set. After a while, she goes back to the cave, puts the doll under her girdle, and soon afterwards is supposed to be pregnant. 240. With a like intent, Indian women in Peru used to wrap up stones like babies and leave them at the foot of a large stone, which they revered for this purpose. 241. Among the Makitisses, a Kaffir tribe of South Africa, a traveler observed a woman carefully tending a doll made out of a gourd, adorned with necklaces of glass beads, and heavily weighted with iron ore. On inquiry, he learned that she had been directed by the medicine man to do this as a means of obtaining a child. 242. Among the Basidos, childless wives make rude effigies of clay and give them the name of some tutelar deity. They treat these dolls as if they were real children, and beseech the divinity to whom they have dedicated them to grant them the power of conception. 243. In Eno, a district of West Africa, women may often be seen carrying wooden dolls strapped, like babies, on their backs as a cure for sterility. 244. In Japan, when a marriage is unfruitful, the old women of the neighborhood come to the house and go through a pretense of delivering the wife of a child. The infant is represented by a doll. 245. The Maoris had a household god, whose image was in the form of an infant. The image was very carefully made, generally life-size, and adorned with the family jewels. Barren women nursed it and addressed it in the most endearing terms in order to become mothers. 246. Sita note, magical images to procure offspring in the Eastern Archipelago. Among the Batas of Sumatra, a barren woman who would become a mother will make a wooden image of a P72 child and hold it in her lap, believing that this will lead to the fulfillment of her wish. 247. In the Babar Archipelago, when a woman desires to have a child, she invites a man who is himself the father of a large family to pray on her behalf to Upilero, the spirit of the sun. A doll is made of red cotton, which the woman clasps in her arms as if she would suckle it. Then the father of many children takes a fowl and holds it by the legs to the woman's head, saying, "O Upilero, make use of the fowl. Let fall, let descend a child, I beseech you, I entreat you, let a child fall and descend into my hands and on my lap." Then he asks the woman, "Has the child come?" And she answers, "Yes, it is sucking already." After that, the man holds the fowl on the husband's head and mumbles some form of words. Lastly, the bird is killed and laid, together with some beetle, on the domestic place of sacrifice. When the ceremony is over, Word goes about in the village that the woman has been brought to bed, and her friends come and congratulate her. 248. Here the pretense that a child has been born is a purely magical rite designed to secure, by means of imitation or mimicry, that a child really shall be born. But an attempt is made to add to the efficacy of the rite by means of prayer and sacrifice. To put it otherwise, magic is here blent with and reinforced by religion. In Sabay, one of the islands in Torres Straits, a similar custom of purely magical character is observed, without any religious ally. Here, when a woman is pregnant, all the other women assemble. The husband's sister makes an image of a male child and places it before the pregnant woman. Afterwards the image is nursed until the birth of the child in order to ensure that the baby shall be a boy. To secure male offspring, a woman will also press to her abdomen a fruit resembling the male organ of generation, which she then passes to another woman who has borne none but boys. This, it is clear, is imitative magic in a slightly different form. 249. In the 7th month of a woman's P73 pregnancy, common people in Java observe a ceremony which is plainly designed to facilitate the real birth by mimicking it. Husband and wife repair to a well or to the bank of a neighboring river. The upper part of the woman's body is bare, but young banana leaves are fastened under her arms, a small opening, or rather fold, being left in the leaves in front. Through this opening, or fold in the leaves on his wife's body, the husband lets fall from above a weaver's shuttle. An old woman receives the shuttle as it falls, takes it up in her arms and dangles it as if it were a baby, saying, "Oh, what a dear little child! Oh, what a beautiful little child!" Then the husband lets an egg slip through the fold, and when it lies on the ground as an emblem of the afterbirth, he takes his sword and cuts through the banana leaf at the place of the fold, obviously, as if he were severing the nipple string. 250. Persons of high rank in Java observe the ceremony after a fashion in which the real meaning of the rite is somewhat obscured. The pregnant woman is clothed in a long robe, which her husband, kneeling before her, severs with a stroke of his sword from bottom to top. Then he throws his sword on the ground and runs away as fast as he can. 251. According to another account, the woman is wrapped round with white thread. Her husband cuts it with his sword, throws away an oblong white gourd, dashes a fowl's egg to the ground, rolls along a young cocoa nut on which the figures of a man and woman have been painted, and so departs in haste. 252. Among some of the Dayaks of Borneo, when a woman is in hard labor, a wizard is called in, who essays to facilitate the delivery in a rational manner, by manipulating the body of the sufferer. Meantime another wizard, outside the room, exerts himself to attain the same P74 and by means which we should regard as wholly irrational. He, in fact, pretends to be the expectant mother. A large stone attached to his stomach by a cloth wrapped round his body represents the child in the womb, and, following the directions shouted to him by his colleague on the real scene of operations, he moves this make-believe baby about on his body, in exact imitation of the movements of the real baby till the infant is born. 253. Cite a note, simulation of birth at adoption and after supposed death. The same principle of make-believe, so dear to children, has led other peoples to employ a simulation of birth as a form of adoption, and even as a mode of restoring a supposed dead person to life. If you pretend to give birth to a boy, or even to a great bearded man who has not a drop of your blood in his veins, then, in the eyes of primitive law and philosophy, that boy or man is really your son to all intents and purposes. Thus Diodorus tells us that when Zeus persuaded his jealous wife's hero to adopt Hercules, the goddess got into bed, and clasping the burly hero to her bosom, pushed him through her robes and let him fall to the ground in imitation of her real birth. And the historian adds, that in his own day the same mode of adopting children was practiced by the barbarians. 254. At the present time it is said to be still in use in Bulgaria and among the Bosnian Turks. A woman will take a boy, whom she intends to adopt, and push or pull him through her clothes. Ever afterwards he is regarded as her very son, and inherits the whole property of his adoptive parents. 255. Among the Barons of Sarawak, when a woman desires to adopt a grown-up man or woman, a great many people assemble and have a feast. The adopting mother, seated in public on a raised and covered seat, allows the adopted person to crawl from behind between her legs. As soon as he appears in front, he is P75 stroked with the sweet-scented blossoms of the Erica palm and tied to the woman. Then the adopting mother and the adopted son or daughter, thus bound together, waddle to the end of the house and back again in front of all the spectators. The tie established between the two by this graphic imitation of childbirth is very strict. An offense committed against an adopted child is reckoned more heinous than one committed against a real child. 256. In Central Africa, the Bahima practice adoption. The male relatives always take charge of a brother's children. When a man dies, his brother takes any children of the deceased and places them one by one in his wife's lap. Then he binds round her waist a thong used for tying the legs of restive cows during milking, just as is done after childbirth. The children are then brought up with his own family. 257. In ancient Greece, any man who had been supposed erroneously to be dead, and for whom in his absence funeral rites had been performed, was treated as dead to society till he had gone through the form of being born again. He was passed through a woman's lap, then washed, dressed in swaddling clothes, and put out to nurse. Not until this ceremony had been punctually performed might he mix freely with living folk. 258. In ancient India, under similar circumstances, the supposed dead man had to pass the first night after his return in a tub filled with a mixture of fat and water. There he sat with doubled up fists and without uttering a syllable, like a child, in the womb, while over him were performed all the sacraments that were wont to be celebrated over a pregnant woman. Next morning he got out of the tub and went through once more all the other sacraments he had formerly partaken of from his youth up. In particular, he married a wife or espoused his old one over again with due solemnity. 259. Cita note, simulation of birth among the Akakuayu. Amongst the Akakuayu of British East Africa, every member of the tribe, whether male or female, has to go P76 through a pretense of being born again. The age at which the ceremony is performed varies with the ability of the father to provide the goat or sheep which is required for the due observance of the rite. But it seems that the new birth generally takes place when a child is about 10 years old or younger. If the child's father or mother is dead, a man or woman acts as proxy on the occasion, and in such a case the woman is thenceforth regarded by the child as its own mother. A goat or sheep is killed in the afternoon and the stomach and intestines are reserved. This ceremony takes place at evening in a hut. None but women are allowed to be present. A circular piece of the goat skin or sheep skin is passed over one shoulder and under the other arm of the child who is to be born again. And the animal's stomach is similarly passed over the child, other shoulder and under its other arm. The mother, or the woman who acts as mother, sits on a hut on the floor with the child between her knees. The sheep's or goat's gut is passed round her in front of the child. She groans as if in labor, another woman cuts the gut as if it were the navel string, and the child imitates the cry of a newborn infant. Until a lad has thus been born again in mimicry, he may not assist at the disposal of his father's body after death, nor help to carry him out into the wilds to breathe his last. Formerly the ceremony of the new birth was combined with the ceremony of circumcision. But the two are now kept separate. 260. In origin we may suppose that this curious pretense of being born again regularly formed part of the initiatory rites through which every Kikuyu lad and every Kikuyu girl had to pass before he or she was recognized as a full-grown member of the tribe. 261. For in many parts of the world, a simulation of death and resurrection has been enacted by candidates on such occasions as well as on admission to the membership of certain secret societies. 262. The intention of the mock birth P77 or mock resurrection is not clear, but we may conjecture that it is designed on the principles of homeopathic or imitative magic either to impart to the candidate the powers of a ghost or to enable him to be reborn again into the world whenever he shall have died in good earnest. Side note, magical images to procure love. Magical images have often been employed for the amiable purpose of winning love. Thus, to shoot an arrow into the heart of a clay image was an ancient Hindu mode of securing a woman's affection. Only the bowstring must be of hemp, the shaft of the arrow must be of black ala wood, its plume an owl's feather, and its barb a thorn. 263. No doubt the wound inflicted on the heart of the clay image was supposed to make a corresponding impression on the woman's heart. Among the Chippewa Indians there used to be few young men or women who had not little images of the persons whose love they wished to win. They pricked the hearts of the images and inserted magical powders in the punctures, while they addressed the effigies by the names of the persons whom they represented, bidding them requite their affection. 264. Ancient witches and wizards melted wax in the fire in order to make the hearts of their sweethearts to melt of love. 265. And as the wound of love may be inflicted by an image, so by an image, it may be healed. How that can be done is told by Han in a poem, based on the experience of one of his own schoolfellows. It is called The Pilgrimage to Kevlar, and describes how sick people offer waxen models of their ailing members to the Virgin Mary at Kevlar in order that she may heal them of their infirmities. In the poem, a lover, wasting away for love and sorrow at the death of his sweetheart, offers to the Virgin the waxen model of the heart with a prayer that she would heal his heartache. 266. Such customs, still commonly P78 observed in some parts of Catholic Europe, are interesting because they show how in later times magic comes to be incorporated with religion. The molding of wax images of ailing members is in its origin purely magical. The prayer to the Virgin or to a saint is purely religious. The combination of the two is a crude, if pathetic, attempt to turn both magic and religion to account for the benefit of the sufferer. Side note, magical images to maintain domestic harmony. The natives of New Caledonia make use of effigies to maintain or restore harmony between husband and wife. Two spindle-shaped bundles, one representing the man and the other the woman, are tied firmly together to symbolize and ensure the amity of the couple. They are made up of various plants, together with some threads from the woman's girdle and a piece of the man's apron. A bow needle forms the axis of each. The talisman is meant to render the union of the spouses indissoluble, and is carefully treasured by them both. If, nevertheless, a domestic jar should unfortunately take place, the husband repairs to the family burying ground with the precious packet. There he lights a fire with a wood of a particular kind, fumigates the talisman, sprinkles it with water from a prescribed source, waves it round his head, and then stirring the needle in the bundle which represents himself, he says, "I change the heart of this woman, that she may love me." If the wife still remains obdurate, he ties a sugar cane to the bundle and presents it to her through a third person. If she eats of the sugar cane, she feels her love for her husband revive. On her side, she has the right to operate in like manner on the bundle, which represents herself, always provided that she does not go to the burying ground, which is strictly forbidden to women. 267. Side note, homeopathic magic in medicine. Another beneficent use of homeopathic magic is to heal or prevent sickness. In ancient Greece, when a man died of dropsy, his children were made to sit with their feet in water until the body was burned. This was supposed to prevent the disease from attacking them. 268. Similarly, on P79, the principle of water to water among the natives of the hills near Rajamahal in India, the body of a person who has died of dropsy is thrown into a river. They think that if the corpse were buried, the disorder would return and carry off other people. 269. Side note, homeopathic treatment of jaundice. Homeopathic treatment of St. Anthony's fire. Homeopathic virtue of crossbills. The ancient Hindus performed an elaborate ceremony based on homeopathic magic for the cure of jaundice. Its main drift was to banish the yellow color to yellow creatures and yellow things, such as the sun, to which it properly belongs, and to procure for the patient a healthy red color from a living, vigorous source, namely a Red Bull. With this intention, a priest recited the following spell: "Up to the sun shall go thy heartache and thy jaundice, in the color of the Red Bull do we envelop thee. We envelop thee in red tints, unto long life. May this person go unscathed and be free of yellow color." The cows whose divinity is Rohini, they who, moreover, are themselves red, Rohini in their every form and every strength we do envelop thee. Into the parrots, into the thrush, do we put thy jaundice, and, furthermore, into the yellow wagtail do we put thy jaundice. While he uttered these words, the priest, in order to infuse the rosy hue of health into the sallow patient, gave him water to sip, which was mixed with the hair of a red bull. He poured water over the animal's back and made the sick man drink it. He seated him on the skin of a red bull and tied a piece of the skin to him. Then, in order to improve his color by thoroughly eradicating the yellow taint, he proceeded thus. He first daubed him from head to foot with a yellow porridge made of turmeric or curcuma, a yellow plant, set him on a bed, tied 3 yellow birds, to wit a parrot, a thrush, and a yellow wagtail, by means of a yellow string to the foot of the bed. Then, pouring water over the patient, he washed off the yellow porridge, and with it no doubt, the jaundice, from him to the birds. After that, by way of giving a final bloom to his complexion, he took some hairs of a red bull, wrapped them in gold leaf, and glued them to the patient's skin. 270. The Piety ancients held that if a person suffering from jaundice looked sharply at a stone curlew, and the bird looked steadily at him, he was cured of the disease. Such is the nature, says Plutarch, and such the temperament of the creature that it draws out and receives the malady which issues, like a stream, through the eyesight. 271. So well recognized among bird fanciers was this valuable property of the stone curlew that when they had one of these birds for sale they kept it carefully covered, lest a jaundiced person should look at it and be cured for nothing. 272. The virtue of the bird lay not in its color but in its large golden eye, which, if it do not pass for a tuft of yellow lichen, is the first thing that strikes the searcher, as the bird cowers, to escape observation, on the sandy, flint-strewn surface of the ground which it loves to haunt, and with which its drab plumage blends so well that only a practiced eye can easily detect it. 273. Thus the yellow eye of the bird drew out the yellow jaundice. Pliny tells of another, or perhaps the same, bird, to which the Greeks gave their name for jaundice, because if a jaundiced man saw it, the disease left him and slew the bird. 274. He mentions also a stone, which was supposed to cure jaundice because its hue resembled that of a jaundiced skin. 275. In modern Greece, jaundice goes by the name of the golden disease, and very naturally it can be healed by gold. 2. Effect a perfect cure. All that you have to do is this. Take a piece of gold, best of all an English sovereign, since English gold is the purest, and put it in a measure of wine. Expose the wine with the gold to the stars for 3 nights. Then drink 3 glasses of it daily, till it is used up. By that time the jaundice will be quite washed out of your system. The cure is, in the strictest sense of the word, a sovereign one. 276. Piety 101. Cure for jaundice, like the modern Greek one, is to drink a glass of water in which a gold coin has been left overnight. 277. A remedy based on the principle of contraries is to look steadily at pitch or other black substances. 278. In South Russia, a Jewish remedy for jaundice is to wear golden bracelets. 279. Here the great homeopathic principle is clearly the same as in the preceding cases, though its application is different. In Germany, yellow turnips, gold coins, gold rings, saffron, and other yellow things are still esteemed remedies for jaundice, just as a stick of red sealing wax carried on the person cures the red eruption, popularly known as St. Anthony's fire, or the bloodstone with its blood red spots less bleeding. 280. Another popular remedy in Germany for the red St. Anthony's fire and also for bleeding is supplied by the common crossbills. In this bird after the first molt, the difference between the sexes is shown by the hens inclining to yellowish-green, while the cocks become diversified by orange, yellow and red, their plumage finally deepening into a rich crimson red, varied in places by a flame color. 281. The smallest reflection may convince us that these gorgeous hues must be endowed with very valuable medical properties. Accordingly, in some parts of Bavaria, Saxony, and Bohemia, people keep crossbills in cages in order that the redbirds may draw the red St. Anthony's fire in the inflammation of fever to themselves and so relieve the human patient. Often in a peasant's cottage you may see the redbird in its cage hanging beside a sickbed and drawing to itself the hectic flush from the cheeks of the hot and restless patient, who lies tossing under the blankets. And the dried body of the crossbill has only to be placed on a wound to stop the bleeding at once. It is not the color only of the feathers which produces this salutary effect. The peculiar P82 shape of the bill, which gives the bird its English and German name, is a contributory cause. For the horny sheets of the bill cross each other obliquely, and this formation undoubtedly enables the bird to draw diseases to itself more readily than a beak of the common shape could possibly do. Curious observers have even remarked that when the upper bill crosses the lower to the right, the bird will attract the diseases of men, whereas if the upper bill crosses the lower to the left, it will attract the diseases of women. But I cannot vouch for the accuracy of this particular observation. However, that may be certain it is that no fire will break out in a house where a crossbill is kept in a cage, neither will lightning strike the dwelling. And this immunity can only be ascribed to the protective coloring of the bird, the red hue of its plumage serving to ward off the red lightning and inhibit the red conflagration in the bud. However, the poor bird seldom lives to old age. Nor could this reasonably be expected of a creature which has to endure so much vicarious suffering. It generally falls a victim to one or other of the maladies of which it has relieved or ailing humanity. The causes which have given the crossbill its remarkable color and the peculiar shape of its bill have escaped many naturalists, but they are familiar to children in Germany. The truth is that when Jesus Christ hung on the cross, a flight of crossbills fluttered round him and tugged with their bills at the nails in his hands and feet to draw them out, till their feathers, which were gray before, were all bedabbled with blood, and their beaks, which had been straight, were twisted awry. So red have been their feathers, and twisted their beaks from that day to this. 282. Another cure, prescribed in Germany for St. Anthony's fire, is to rub the patient with ashes from a house that has been burned down. 283. For it is easy to see that as the fire died out in that house, so St. Anthony's fire will die out in that man. Cite a note, the shrew mouse and the shrew ash. Homeopathic prescriptions to make the hair grow. A curious application of homeopathic magic to the P83 cure of disease is founded on the Old English superstition that if a shrew mouse runs over a beast, be it horse, cow, or sheep, the animal suffers cruelly and may lose the use of its limb. Against this accident the farmer used to keep a shrew ash at hand as a remedy. A shrew ash was prepared thus. A deep hole was bored in the tree, and a shrew mouse was thrust in alive and plugged in, probably with some incantations which have been forgotten. 284. An ancient Indian cure for a scanty crop of hair was to pour a solution of certain plants over the head of the patient. This had to be done by a doctor who was dressed in black and had eaten black food, and the ceremony must be performed in the early morning, while the stars were fading in the sky, and before the black crows had risen cawing from their nests. 285. The exact virtue of these plants has escaped our knowledge, but we can hardly doubt that they were dark and hairy. While the black clothes of the doctor, his black food, and the swarthy hue of the crows unquestionably combine to produce a crop of black hair on the patient's head. A more disagreeable means of attaining the same end is adopted by some of the tribes of Central Australia. To promote the growth of a boy's hair, a man with flowing locks bites the youth's scalp as hard as he can, being urged thereto by his friends, who sit round watching him at his task, while the sufferer howls aloud with pain. 286. Clearly, on the principle of capillary attraction, if I may say so. He thus imparts of his own mature abundance to the scarcity of his youthful friend. Side note: various homeopathic remedies. One of the great merits of homeopathic magic is that it enables the cure to be performed on the person of the doctor instead of on that of his victim, who is thus relieved of all trouble and inconvenience, while he sees his medical man writhe in anguish before him. For example, the peasants of P84 Perche, in France, labor under the impression that a prolonged fit of vomiting is brought about by the patient's stomach becoming unhooked, as they call it, and so falling down. Accordingly, a practitioner is called in to restore the organ to its proper place. After hearing the symptoms, he at once throws himself into the most horrible contortions for the purpose of unhooking his own stomach. Having succeeded in the effort, he next hooks it up again in another series of contortions and grimaces, while the patient experiences a corresponding relief. Fee 5 francs. 287. In like manner, a diet medicine man, who has been fetched in a case of illness, will lie down and pretend to be dead. He is accordingly treated like a corpse, is bound up in mats, taken out of the house, and deposited on the ground. After about an hour, the other medicine men loose the pretended dead man and bring him to life. And as he recovers, the sick person is supposed to recover too. 288. A cure for a tumor, based on the principle of homeopathic magic, is prescribed by Marcellus of Bordeaux, court physician to Theodosius I, in his curious work on medicine. It is as follows. Take a root of vervain, cut it across, and hang one end of it round the patient's neck, and the other in the smoke of the fire. As the vervain dries up in the smoke, so the tumor will also dry up and disappear. If the patient should afterwards prove ungrateful to the good physician, the man of skill can avenge himself very easily by throwing the vervain into water. For as the root absorbs the moisture once more, the tumor will return. 289. The same sapient writer recommends you, if you are troubled with pimples, to watch for a falling star, and then instantly, while the star is still shooting from the sky, to wipe the pimples with a cloth or anything that comes to hand. Just as the star falls from the sky, so the pimples will fall from your body. Only you must be very careful not to wipe them with your bare hand, or the pimples will be transferred to it. 290. P85. Side note: sympathetic magic to ensure the food supply. Further, homeopathic and in general sympathetic magic plays a great part in the measures taken by the root hunter or fisherman to secure an abundant supply of food. On the principle that like produces like, many things are done by him and his friends in deliberate imitation of the result which he seeks to attain. And, on the other hand, many things are scrupulously avoided because they bear some more or less fanciful resemblance to others which would really be disastrous. Side note: systematic use of sympathetic magic in Central Australia. Nowhere is the theory of sympathetic magic more systematically carried into practice for the maintenance of the food supply than in the barren regions of Central Australia. Here the tribes are divided into a number of totem clans, each of which is charged with the duty of propagating and multiplying their totem for the good of the community by means of magical ceremonies and incantations. The great majority of the totems are edible animals and plants, and the general result supposed to be accomplished by these magical totemic ceremonies, or intakuma, as the Iran to call them, is that of supplying the tribe with food and other necessaries. Often the rites consist of an imitation of the effect which the people desire to produce. In other words, their magic is of the homeopathic or imitative sort. Side note: intakuma, or magical ceremonies for the increase of the totemic animals and plants in Central Australia. With chetty grub ceremony, emu ceremony, hakia flower ceremony, kangaroo ceremony, grass seed ceremony. Thus among the rite of the men of the Wukchedi grub totem perform a series of elaborate ceremonies for multiplying the grub which the other members of the tribe use as food. One of the ceremonies is a pantomime, representing the fully developed insect in the act of emerging from the chrysalis. A long narrow structure of branches is set up to imitate the chrysalis case of a grub. In this structure, a number of men, who have the grub for their totem, sit and sing of the creature in its various stages. Then they shuffle out of it in a squatting posture, and as they do so they sing of the insect emerging from the chrysalis. This is supposed to multiply the numbers of the grubs. 291. Again, in order to multiply emus, which are an important article of food, the men of the emu totem in the Arunta tribe proceed as follows. They clear